FIFA could solve world poverty and people would still find a way to pick holes in them.
I feel like we're sort of stumbling towards it, and we're not that far away from it, but it won't be in this World Cup.
And I don't think you can't hype a sport into existence. And unfortunately, I think that's like happening across the board. The experience of consuming content on a publisher website is awful. It's like, it's ads. You're bombarded with stuff. Like, it's obviously super distracting.
So we can't actually see it because obviously it's geo-blocked and our VPNs won't let us.
The trust economy is just like deteriorating rapidly. And, how do we find news and information that you don't have to actually like Google and verify straight away?
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Attention Shift podcast. I'm Ed Abis, and this week I've got Rich Johnson with me. Rich, welcome to the pod.
Morning, Ed.
Hi everyone. Just before we get into the pod, I want to talk about some research we've just done. We surveyed 1,500 games across the UK, US and Europe and found that your fans want to spend more with you. You're just not giving them enough reasons to. To find out exactly how much revenue your organisation is leaving on the table and what to do about it, head to display.com/insights or scan the QR code on screen. Download the report and the guide. Both are free. Cool, right, so we'll get straight into it. Obviously, we're in the middle of the World Cup, so we've got a World Cup filled pod this week. So I want to kick off first with BBC Sport. So BBC Sport have published some early numbers. I noticed it on LinkedIn yesterday around some of the stuff that they've been doing around their digital engagement. So they've been doing some serious numbers around how many people have been going to the BBC Sport app. They said 3 million unique users. Off the back of that, they've had the 3D experience. They said that the predictor attracted 300,000 users in week one, with a large percentage returning on a daily basis. So you can see that they have gone all in for this edition of the World Cup, and they really have maintained the focus of how do we drive people, not just to watch, to engage with. And you can see that in terms of how they've been producing the live games as well. There's been a lot of QR codes on screen to drive people in there. But I don't know if you've had a chance to engage with any of this at all during the course of any of the games.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting generally. So much of the focus around, obviously, BBC and ITV and the way they've been positioned in the UK has been around actually the viewing experience.
Yeah.
And the focus on the sets and the prioritization of budgets. Clearly, what I think is super interesting is, again, like BBC have always been innovators when it comes to digital, and again, I think like this World Cup is another demonstration of that. Like, they are willing to try new things and try different things. Obviously, looking at the kind of spatial experiences that they've created. As you say, looking at, again, to coin some of your words, more of the like active, audience engagement style tactics. I think it's really cool, finding different ways to pull fans away from just viewing, obviously on their screens and obviously engaging more on their devices. So I think there's a lot to like around what they've done. I think there's a lot to applaud, and for all the flack they get, those numbers seem to be really great. It's nice to see them published, obviously, so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, interesting. BBC Sport, the BBC Sport app is always my go-to generally anyway for sort of football news, scores, things that are going on. So I just naturally use it regularly anyway. So I even without them driving me to it from the games themselves, I was already in there. What I have found interesting, this is probably my sort of counter to it as well, is like ultimately they are driving audiences there and they're saying to people, engage with us, but they're never, for me, not closing that feedback loop. If all of these people are doing all of these things, why not bring the data that's being generated from it back into the discussion with the presenters, with the pundits, mid-game, pre-game, after the game? Because I think if you really want to drive that community experience where people feel like they're being heard and listened to, that's the next step. But it could just be that they're slowly getting towards it. They're just not quite there in terms of connecting broadcast and digital still.
Yeah. I think that's kind of interesting. So much of the World Cup as the elite competition of football is naturally focused around insights of, obviously, the pundits and the
having the best guests and the best presenters. Yeah.
And I think there's some really nice stuff within there. I have been watching ITV because for that for the live experience, because of the aesthetic, which I think is great, because of the pundits, and again the sort of segments that have almost divided opinion. But I love the the Emma Hayes stuff. I think it's fantastic. I think she's great. It's fantastic to get that level of insight. On the flip side, and to some of the BBC stuff, it's like they're probably winning this digital battle as often they do. But it would be really cool to see more audience and fan insight come into some of the broadcasts, because ultimately that's the stuff that we're all doing. Again, watching it together, watching at home in the WhatsApp chats. So I would love to see a little bit more of that reflected, just because it's so native to everyone in terms of how we're actually consuming the game.
Yeah, I think and the way they're talking about, because they've obviously gone that one step further, where they're not just doing simple polls. And look, polls have their place, but they are doing predictors, which takes a level of time investment from people to go and do it. And they're obviously asking the pundits as well what they think about this. Like, there are really, really obvious opportunities to be able to go deep with that in terms of what the audience thinks in the lead up to the game, to really get a sense of it. Because I think, as much as Olivier Giroud was an amazing player, and he did a lot for France. Like, his insights have been a bit dry, and he tends to say the same thing. I think with this, at least you'll drive debate and force him and others to try and take a different angle to what they're saying, rather than the same thing again and again and again. And I think that's why I always naturally lean into these forms of audience interaction, because I think they do drive those studio presenters and guests to think a bit differently than they would do normally.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's something we've spoken about before, just generally this idea of fan data offering, or and that fan insight and opinion offering,
as important as official data in a sense.
And performance data. It just is, because it that is what is driving our world. The soap opera of debate that happens amongst fandoms, and obviously just gets pulled into sort of pulled into all aspects of our life. It'd be cool to see that reflected, because at the moment, obviously, it's really up to the panelists to sort of drive that. And there's only a certain amount of real estate that they have to do it. You're talking like windows of 30 seconds during a broadcast. So I think it'd be really cool.
Just to close out, we talked about this a lot, haven't we? And just to close it off, it's kind of like, look, Opta and other data providers, they give you the official view of what's happened, what's about to happen, what could happen. But fan data gives you feeling. And I think ultimately you watch these things, you get invested in these things to have a feeling, and ultimately reflecting that is I think the thing that often gets missed. But I feel like we're sort of stumbling towards it, and we're not that far away from it, but it won't be in this World Cup.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Yeah. Cool, so the biggest events of the year are gold mines for publishers, and Display's new research shows you exactly how to cash in. We analysed over 30,000 comments across the US election, the World Cup, the Met Gala and more, uncovering 8 ways audiences engage, so you can package, price and sell your content and own the conversation, whether you have broadcast rights or not. Head to display.com insights to download Harness the Hype today. On the back of obviously what the BB have been doing, just from a more holistic basis, and we've seen some numbers coming out of the US around viewership. So look, the FIFA is saying that there's been record viewership across the board, and I don't think it's been any coincidence that the US have got off to a flyer, and that really, really has focused the minds of the audience in the US in terms of they think they're going to go and win it, and the reality is probably somewhere in between. I think it's definitely focused the minds of people, and they've seen some serious numbers. I think in Germany as well. I think they said 23 million people watched their defeat of Curaçao as well. So I think the numbers look like, the viewing numbers certainly look like they've been off the charts so far. But I think at the same time as well, where's the unified view of this as well? Because viewing numbers are what they are. They don't necessarily mean engaged views. And that's the picture that we're not necessarily getting.
I think, viewing numbers, naturally important. For me, it's interesting talking about the BBC, because they're starting talking about the BBC because they're an organisation that just kind of gets bashed monumentally for anything that they do. And I think the same is true for FIFA. Now, I am not some sort of like FIFA fanboy. I think, all the stuff around the ticketing has been, just pretty disgraceful, really, and would be ashamed to be. I would love to go to some of those games, but yeah, clearly it's like the barrier to entry to actually still paying for some of the tickets is insane. But again, no surprise, view numbers look amazing, and I think credit must also be given to FIFA for parts of their strategy that are driving all of this. They are actually really trying things that us as a sports industry, really ask for and want other people to do and try and talk about. And that is, the elements of culture that they're trying to tap into. Their sort of FIFA sound strategy. I don't know how it's viewed internally, but it's probably viewed as a huge success. There's some really interesting stats actually that kind of back this up. We're going to get a ton of moans and groans in about 4 weeks' time with the half an hour long halftime show. There was obviously moans and groans about some of the elements of the entertainment around the opening games.
And the fact it was done in multiple places as well, because you've got 3 countries, so yeah.
Yeah, but there is no question that is a success for FIFA. The amount of views, right, in the opening, whatever it is, like I pulled some stats at the time.
It probably ended up being more like a 24-hour window, didn't it, with the fact they had 3 opening ceremonies?
On YouTube, within the opening 5 days, the most viewed videos on YouTube, even whilst the games were going on, were those opening performances, the entertainment. Because
they're linking into lifestyle and culture.
Exactly. The most viewed video ever on the FIFA YouTube channel is actually a BTS song from the World Cup 2022 playlist.
Yeah.
It's the same strategy as the NFL and Super Bowl. The most viewed videos on the NFL YouTube channel are actually of Super Bowl halftime performances. So, they have been pulling the right levers to attract the maximum amount of reach and attention. Their gaming strategy, again, like ton of question marks over the breakup with EA. I think there's still question marks over whether that's the right thing to do, but they have, stuck to their guns on releasing and being in control of releasing a series of, gaming products, mobile, on Netflix. Again, the quality of them
they've done the predictor deal as well. They've done as well, so they've been going down the road doing their own predictions as well. Yeah,
which I think felt like a fairly last-minute move, but they've been also experimenting with the 3D, with alternative spatial highlights and uploads onto YouTube. Again, like a ton of question marks over all of this stuff, but we ask for innovation in the sports industry. We ask for people to move quickly and sort of try new things, and credit has to be given to a lot of them as a big organization that they are doing some of this stuff. And of course you can critique whether they're doing it or doing it well or doing it for the right reasons. But they do it. And again, back to the point around the numbers, I think obviously it's going to be the most, viewed World Cup of all time. I wouldn't put any question marks over that. Again, whether it is or not, that is going to be the press release. And listen, FIFA could solve world poverty and people would still find a way to pick holes in them. Again, I'm not
absolutely.
To be clear, I'm not some sort of FIFA fanboy, but I also do really think it should be recognised. And people have laughed at them so much for the Levi's thing and the covering up of the brands, which again has been super heavy-handed but that is par for course. No one's super surprised by this stuff. It's pretty par for course. So
as the saying goes, no news is bad news in a sense. It's still driving talkability around the actual event in itself just by doing those kind of things as well. I think one thing we haven't covered off as well, which will leave is nice on to the next story as well, the fact that they've been testing out this process around YouTube and TikTok where they're showing early moments of the game. Now, we haven't seen any numbers around that yet, and we were just having a bit of a look earlier, weren't we, to see how people were doing it, where most of the media rights holders have been using their build-up to the game, then part of the game, to ultimately where they're capturing the audience. It'd be interesting to see if anything even comes out what happens at that point when the viewer knows that they can't watch it there anymore? Are they trying to almost capture that people are searching for live free streams on YouTube and on TikTok, start watching that, and then because they're already in the game, it's too late to go and find it elsewhere, so they have to then effectively go to the rights holder to watch it because they don't have time to find it anywhere else? Is that ultimately the simple strategy that they've employed, which we don't really know that yet?
Well, as the supposed guardians of the game, best intentions of growing, their mandate is obviously to grow the game of football, both within fandom, viewership, obviously also, accessibility and development as well. But, it makes sense that they would do something like that with obviously the backing of, the broadcasters who are paying the money, for access. But like, it makes sense because, what are people doing if their national team is playing? They're searching for where they can find to watch it. That's obviously happening on devices. And great, like, meet them at the point of consumption. Whether the right strategy was also translating that into a last minute deal with a VPN provider for the aims of maximizing reach, that's probably up for debate. But I think again it's it's a modern tactic of finding a way to maximize reach. Can everyone get away with that? Well, probably not. I think
No.
that is a privilege of the most popular sport and sporting event on the planet. But
look,
they have been doing really interesting stuff with their YouTube strategy anyway.
They have, yeah. Which brings us on to CazéTV in Brazil, right? Everyone knows that obviously they went and did a deal with CazéTV in Brazil, and also Live Mode, who are part of that stable, similarly in Portugal as well. So you can watch Brazilian games in Brazil, and I think you said in other parts of South America as well, and you can watch Portugal games in Portugal live on YouTube on Cazé and Live Mode's channels, which are effectively one of the same. And look, and Cazé have seen a peak of 12.4 million people, I think, what concurrent views for the Brazil versus Morocco game. There's also a total concurrent peak of 20.2 million for the same match. That they are, they've been growing more and more and more. Ronaldo's invested in them. The parent company, Live Mode, has been growing more and more. And I think Cazé appeared at a time where the Brazilian media market was so fragmented and so on its arse, to be brutally honest, that they saw an opportunity and they did what they did. And FIFA have seen an opportunity and they've done what they've done. And they would argue that. And I think when you look at it like this, like we've just been talking about it, different countries have different strategies. So it's kind of like right message to the right people at the right time, wherever you need to, because we live in such a fragmented world, one size doesn't fit all, and they're clearly employing different ways of doing it.
Yeah. Again, it's so cool that for such a huge market, particularly for football, one of the primary markets globally for football, is being shown live on YouTube for free. It's just brilliant. But and the numbers are crazy. Yeah, obviously concurrents are really impressive. Because again, it's not always going to be native for people. Like I say, there is a certain demographic going to be looking out for it, but it's not native, and it's also not as convenient as just like, listen. And I'm very inexperienced with how Brazilian broadcast and media works, but certainly here it's like the convenience of flicking on your TV and just going boom, my TV or BBC. It's like it's super native, but for there to draw those kind of numbers on a platform like YouTube. I also was having a look at time of recording. Argentina Haiti was last night. The total numbers on the stream are 104 million views. Now, it's insane. Yeah, one of the most interesting things, actually looking at the numbers, at the time of recording just a couple of days ago was the Brazil-Haiti match. I've got 103 million views on the actual stream. Now, what's super interesting, obviously like incredibly impressive numbers, just on a single stream. Yeah. What's super interesting, I haven't actually been able to watch the video just because I can't get access from here. But it's a 12-hour feed. So I think, again, what they're doing is obviously showing the live game and then just probably showing it on repeats just to maximise that reach for attention.
Well, what they're also got at Cazé as well, they've got people out on the ground. It could well be that they're out in bars and around stadiums, and they're just they're taking the people with them and they're creating, because we've talked about this loads, haven't we, that a live event is not just the 2 hour window, it's a live moment that actually stretches up to days, because you've got your build up, you've got your post. So it could just be that they're, like I said, we can't actually see it because obviously it's geo-blocked and our VPNs won't let us. It could be that they're extending that window too.
Yeah, again, there's just a lot to like about a lot of these different levers that are being pulled, and the numbers are being shown to be really impressive, and I think it would be so easy for the biggest sports event in the world to really just like kind of sit in a box and just do the safe things. But they aren't. And, Kaze generally, I think, has obviously been talked about so much in the industry in terms of what they're doing, and perhaps whether this happens or not, we'll see. But perhaps being a peek into the future regarding how the future of distribution works for live sports events. Can others like justify the critical mass to have that sort of approach? I'm not sure, but certainly it feels like it's a successful experiment to date.
Absolutely, and I think, the point you were saying earlier about like it's not for everyone to be able to access this kind of content. Different demographics, different age ranges. Interestingly, we were in Norway at the weekend working on an event, and we were streaming this particular event we were doing as well, and one of the people in the room with us in the operations centre came over and went, "This is truly engaging. My 80-year-old parents are currently streaming this on YouTube on their iPad." He said, "I didn't even know that they knew how to use an iPad, and they managed to find this and watch it because we just mentioned that we were doing this." And you go, okay, when you start sort of hearing stuff like that, you go like, it's past the, oh, this is just for the younger audiences now. And similarly, my mum's in her 60s as well, and similarly, like, she pretty much watches everything through her iPad. Like, she's got TVs, but she knows where to go and find stuff as well. So, I think we're way past that now, and actually, that's why I think doing this, like I said, neither of us are poster boys for FIFA, just to be clear again, but the fact that they're all doing this and finding different ways they're doing this, that they've got this multi-faceted approach, country by country, with some overarching strategies, but with some local delivery mechanisms. Anyone working in this who knows that is not easy to pull that together and to do that. And yes, they are going to get slagged off for ticket prices being too high and it's too much to get on the train, and some things in their control, some things not in their control. But the reality is to make this as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. They're doing it. Yeah. And that's the only way you can look at it. So interestingly, the fact that we've covered off, obviously, how they are using digital video and social to be able to access audience. So there's an interesting study that's come out from Reuters, and it's the Institute of Study for Journalism, that they published last week. And it was based on a survey of nearly 100,000 people in 48 different markets. Basically, what they're saying now is that 54% of global audience now use social media for news rather than news organisations themselves. But at the same time, trusting social media news is only 22% globally. So audiences are going there to consume that content, but they don't necessarily trust what they're consuming. But they've been hooked on the drug and they don't know what to do. Is the only conclusion I can get from it.
Yeah. Well, I think just because you get your news from, again, like socials, I think everyone's learned to, or hopefully learned to treat a lot of stuff with skepticism. I don't think AI is obviously helping with that, in that, now it can be so convincing in terms of anything that you can watch and consume and actually, trust it. I'm actually, honestly, I'm surprised that it's taken till 2026 for this to tip the scales. I could have definitely anticipated that it would have been a number of years earlier, maybe 4 or 5 years earlier, honestly, but yeah, it's I think for me the reason why is everything has just become a soap opera and dramatized.
Clickbait.
Anything that you would get your news from, of around, things that are happening in the economy, or, in the White House or Westminster, or, obviously sports and the business of sports, and everything that happens is now so dramatized. And I think, headlines, either headlines or hooks, which is how obviously social works, and then sharing that from one person to another, is the most efficient way to, effectively communicate those messages. So it's, as I say, it's absolutely not surprising. I think the most surprising thing is that this type of report didn't claim this about 4 or 5 years ago.
Well, we had a similar kind of thing last week on the pod. We were talking about IAB and talking about where the advertising market's going now, and that ultimately like people are now doing most of their consumption across digital and social media, and that the value of advertising, basically they were saying that the value of advertising now is just as valuable on YouTube as it is on TV. And like, caught up then, realised where we were. You're right, but I think these institutions, like Reuters, for instance, are traditional legacy institutions that, don't get me wrong, look, we don't know how fast they're moving in terms of changing with the times, but I think that's probably the reason why these things are only just coming out now, because I think for a long, long time they were fighting it, trying to protect the infrastructure that existed already, and then they've realised that actually the infrastructure that existed already, I don't think it's going anywhere, but it's just not what it was, and there are other infrastructures now that are already way past... they're just an irritant stage.
And honestly, listen, frankly, the experience of take the publishing side of things. The experience of consuming content on a publisher website is awful. It's like, it's ads. You're bombarded with stuff. Like, it's obviously super distracting. And then obviously you've got paywalls, and I've no problem with paywalls at all. Like, in terms of, if you want to pay for content, I think people should pay for content, good content, and if you're going to do it, great. But they aren't the sticky experiences that you find on social. So again, and it hasn't been for a long time. The publishing websites have been a total disaster to use for a long time, and I think this is just more people discovering that there are other experiences. The trust point, or there are other ways to get that information and news. I think the trust point is kind of critical though, because obviously we've spoken a lot about the BBC. The trust economy is just like deteriorating rapidly, and how do we find news and information that you don't have to actually like Google and verify straight away? Because I find myself doing that a lot of the time with things that I'm sent in WhatsApp groups. And I don't always do it with stuff that I send, because the ability to send something in 2 clicks to someone because you think it's relevant, or you think it's there's a discussion point around it, is like so easy to do. But then I'm constantly, when I'm getting stuff from WhatsApp, like, but is that actually true? And it's a bit of an effort really to kind of like find it out. So I think this like deterioration of trust and how that's combated is potentially something that's sort of just interesting to observe, really.
And I think it's happening in so many walks of life as well. It's not just necessarily a social media thing, right? Because I think people in different industries as well have been sort of leaning into this and realising that actually if they make a big noise or they say something that's controversial, it's likely to get them more clicks than if they don't.
If you're a creator who wants to build a career like the Sidemen or Emma Chamberlain, here's one to watch. You've built the audience, you've got the revenue. How do you take to the next level? Right now, everything you built depends on you showing up. To break out, you've got to look beyond the next upload. The creators building real businesses aren't just making better content. They're building assets that work without them. We've mapped out 4 phases which will turn you from a creator to a media empire. Read the guide, start building beyond the upload.
So, last story then. So obviously we talked earlier about like sort of new modes of distribution and new ways of doing things. So Kings League have just announced that they're laying off anywhere between 30 and 50% of their staff. Obviously while the World Cup's going on as well, and obviously Kings League is Gerard Piqué, ex-Barcelona. He was the founder of that, and it's a creator-led, 7-a-side football property. they're in the process of cutting 41 positions out of their base of 125 employees. They've had a lot of investment. They grew rapidly. Brazil, France, Germany, Spain. There is a place, certainly, for these pop-up, short-form variants of different sports. But obviously we saw what happened with Bowler League as well. Bowler League decided that Germany wasn't the focus anymore because they were moving into the US. Is this the beginning of the end, or is this just more a refocus around what's working and what isn't, and actually a reality of actually those are the things that really cut through?
Probably a bit of both. I mean, I've been so excited with these like challenger products that have been kind of coming into the sports industry, because I think it's needed. I love the elements of disruption, and it keeps incumbents, and because sports does sports does suffer from innovators' dilemma quite a lot, because often it doesn't need to be challenged. The creator industry, or the attention that sort of the creator economy has brought, is a huge disruptor and challenger that's sort of come externally. So I like and I have very much sort of been in support of new leagues, these startup challenger operations, because I think it's interesting, and I think we need it. And obviously, there is a lot of investment and money going into it as well, which, would I put my money into it? Actually, no. I'd be super cautious of where that's deployed and how it's deployed. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I think firstly, in the example of a Kings League and even a Baller, you can't treat it like a tech product, or a tech company, in that it's.
But they have been searching for those kind of valuations.
Yeah, exactly, and you can't. I don't think there's any model here where it operates on a sort of severe J curve, very quickly, where you can incur lots of losses. Because the way that that's done in Silicon Valley and everything is ultimately incurring losses, continue to raise more, but you ultimately have this highly scalable product, and this doesn't kind of quite work in the same way. I pretty much I'm sure that they're going to announce kind of try and launch as many products as they can quite quickly, series, but also new markets. They will announce record views. They will do another raise off the back of that, and then it's really kind of crunch time, and you kind of see what your product is made of, and if you have enough critical mass. I think Kings League it's played out, but slightly earlier, in that again they've raised huge amounts of money. I think just this year $63 million. In February. For me, they've probably launched in too many territories and lacked focus. So you've got Spain, you've got France, you've got US, and maybe South America might be right. You've got the Queens League, and can you sustain and build enough critical mass in all of those markets across a really disruptive model? That's I think the question mark over it, and it's super interesting. Again, they've done a lot of stuff right, the way in which they've engaged creators, given them their own platforms, given them their own distribution, obviously had them involved as owners. The brands that they've got on board are really, credible, very well established, clearly believe in, we need to be part of something that's a little bit more disruptive. So I think there's a ton to give credit to, but it's really...
I think there's one other thing. I think there's one other thing at play as well here as well. That ultimately they've raised what they've raised on ground that they don't own, because they've built these content platforms on platforms that they don't physically own. They are other people's platforms. Now we don't know how many of that audience that is on YouTube or across social channels they can actually identify. But there'll come a point where, investors invariably pile into these things because they get taken along on the crest of the wave. Investors are gamblers, right? They're betting money. Some will win, some will lose. But But there comes a point when they start saying, I want some of my money back, I want a return. And ultimately, if you don't know who any of the audiences are, it stops you ultimately be able to monetize that audience. And if most of that audience is sat on YouTube and the like, not necessarily controlled by them, and suddenly something gets switched off for some reason, what are you left with? So those valuations, I think, that they have been getting, the reality is there ends up being a recorrection, and I just wonder if there's a recorrection happening at the moment as well, where more and more of these people who are creating these things, or creators as well, are realising that whilst they are making money in the short term, they've not necessarily got the long-term control over how they continue to do it. On the other week, like last week I think it was, Mr. Beast went to 500 million, right? At the same time that Mr. Beast, who has the connection that he has with Neil Mohan at the top table of YouTube, he was effectively asking questions of his audience like, what's your age? Where are you from? Like, because he doesn't really know much about his audience.
Yeah, I think that's very much right. I think it comes back to my frustration with how quite a lot of stuff kind of plays out and happens is like there's short-termism. And yes, in regards to like those foundational things, as you say, like, and I don't think it means obviously like building your own platform of where people can watch Kings League, but it's doing even the type of things that you talk about, which is again like finding ways to engage audiences in different places, to capture data and to monetize. To be frankly, whether directly or indirectly. The other point of short-termism is, firstly, as an industry, I think we're too quick to judge and say whether things are right or wrong, or who was right or wrong, or which linked influencer like made this correct prediction. But also, like, from the point of from the Kings League themselves, like, I don't think you truly know whether you've got something that is interesting and that can scale until probably 4 or 5 years in. Then you really know, are people coming back because it's there?
After the initial excitement, as it flattens a bit,
Are people coming back because it's there and because they're fans of it, or are they coming back just because it's been hyped? And because the only reason is because their favorite creators attached to it, or just because they've sort of they were of a sort of particular age, or they've been served at a particular time. So again, like, in that point, that's why, again, I mean, like, you can't really like treat it like some sort of tech product. I think you've got to like build critical mass, like one audience, one market, really kind of see if that's sticky, and then figure out ways to kind of cater for that demand elsewhere. Because I think that's the point. It is about demand. I don't think you can't hype a sport into existence. And unfortunately, I think that's like happening across the board. Here we have Live Golf. I've never had any. I've sort of been to Live. I again was like excited about it. The really unfortunate thing was the narrative was all about money, and again it was trying to be hyped into existence. I think there's elements of certain portions of particularly like women's football or something that's trying to be like hyped into existence. So I think that's the frustration and almost the warning I would sort of say around this is, it doesn't mean, again, to a lot of the thread of this chat is like, doesn't mean we can't be innovative and look at different things, because it's critical, and I'm passionate about that. But also like, let's judge things over a 10-year time span rather than 3 years, and both that's on the amount that's money that's put into it, everything, or the revenue that's made, or the fans that it's got, from a business perspective, but also from an industry perspective.
Perfect. I think that's a good place to wrap up. A longer one than normal this week, but I think we had a lot to talk about, obviously, with the World Cup going on as well. There's been a few other things that have come out too. Thanks so much, Rich, for coming on this week and for your insights. If you want to be a guest on the Attention Shift pod, you can email us at hello@attentionshiftmedia, or you can hit me up on LinkedIn. This has been Rich Johnson. I've been Ed Abis, and thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this conversation, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more videos just like this. And make sure you smash that bell icon too, so you're always the first to know exactly when a new episode drops.